My name is Lemuel Gulliver. I was born in England. At the age of 16, I studied to be a doctor. I worked in London at first, but it was not easy to make money there. I decided to work as a ship's doctor. I liked traveling, and I made several voyages. It was an interesting life. One ship I worked on was called the Antelope. So I took the Antelope and set off on our voyage to the East Indies. Our voyage at first was very prosperous, but one day we were driven by a violent storm to the northwest of Van Diemen's Land. The ship hit a rock in the sea and began to sink. I managed to jump into one of the ship's lifeboats with some sailors, and we thought we were safe. But suddenly, the weather started getting hazy. The wind was so strong that the safety boat could not survive, and with a big wave, our little boat turned over in the water. We all began to swim. I soon lost sight of the other sailors, and I never saw them again. I think they were all drowned. I swam as fate directed me and was pushed forward by wind and tide. I often let my legs drop and could not feel the bottom. But when I was almost gone and able to struggle no longer, I found myself within my depth, and by this time the storm was much abated. I walked a long time. It was evening, and I was exhausted. I lay down on the grass, which was very short and soft, where I slept sounder than ever in my life for about 9 hours. For when I woke up, it was just daylight. I attempted to rise but was not able to stir, for as I happened to lie on my back, I found my arms and legs were strongly fastened on each side to the ground, and my hair, which was long and thick, tied down in the same manner. I felt several slender ligatures across my body, from my armpits to my thighs. I could only look upwards. The sun began to grow hot, and the light offended my eyes. Then I saw a very small creature walking along my body. I looked again, and I was very surprised to see that this creature was really a tiny man. He was hardly 6 inches tall, with a tiny bow and arrow in his hands. Soon there were more of these little men walking on me. There were hundreds of them on the ground near me. They were talking to each other, but I could not understand their language. I was in the utmost astonishment and roared loudly that they all ran back in a fright. And some of them, as I was afterwards told, were hurt with the fall by leaping from my sides upon the ground. Then I tried to free myself with strings and wrench out the pegs that fastened my left arm to the ground. I managed to break the ropes around one of my hands. As soon as I did this, I felt a sharp pain. The little men were shooting arrows at me. The arrows were small, but very sharp, and I decided to lie still. Now the little men constructed a platform near my head. One of them climbed up to the top of the platform. He was standing very close to my ear. He began to shout into my ear. I could hear what he said, but I did not understand the language he was using. He used signs to communicate with me. He told me that the country was called Lilliput, and that he worked for the emperor. Then he explained that I was their prisoner. He told me not to be frightened, because they only wanted to take me to see the emperor. It was now the middle of the morning, and I was almost famished with hunger, having not eaten a morsel for some hours before I left the ship. I put my finger in my mouth to show the little man that I wanted to eat and drink something. He understood me and gave some instructions to the hundreds of little men who were on the ground. They went away, and then they came back with ladders. They offered me food and water. Everything tasted good, but it was very small, like the men themselves. I drank a whole barrel of drink and ate several cattle and sheep. Soon I could hear a lot of noise on the ground near me. I turned my head to look, and I saw that all the little men were now very busy. They had cut down a lot of trees, and they were building something with the trees. They worked for a long time, and then I saw what they were making. It was a large machine with many wheels. The machine was as big as me. I was now tired again, and I fell asleep once more. While I slept, the little men pulled me onto the machine. The movement woke me. I was curious to find out what they were doing. Then I heard a noise, and I saw hundreds of tiny horses. The little men attached the horses to the machine, and the horses began to pull me along. There were 1,500 horses pulling me. The machine began to move slowly forward. We traveled slowly for a long time, and then we came to a city. We stopped outside the city. There was an ancient temple there, and they asked me to get off the machine and enter the temple. I learned later that this temple was one of the largest buildings in the country. It was no longer used because someone had committed a terrible murder there some years before. There was just enough space in the temple for me to enter. Once I was inside, the people tied me up again. They used 91 chains and 36 padlocks. The chains were long enough to allow me to stand and walk around. I'll never forget how surprised and frightened the people were when they saw me stand up and walk. Now the emperor himself came to the temple. He brought his princess with him. They wanted to look at me. They climbed up a tower in the temple and looked down at me where I lay. People from the city began to arrive as well, and they climbed up the walls of the temple to look down at me. Some very daring people put ladders against my body and climbed up these. Everybody was very surprised to see me. I was the biggest man they had ever seen. The next day, the Emperor of Lilliput came to see me again. He looked magnificent in his robe and was mounting a small horse. I tried to speak to him in English, but he did not understand me. I tried all the languages I knew, but he still did not understand me. He stayed about 2 hours, and then he went away. He left some soldiers in charge of me. Some of the people from the city began to come near me. They too wanted to see the giant man. Not all of them were friendly, however. A small group of them began to shoot arrows at me. The colonel in charge of the soldiers was very angry, and he captured 6 of the ringleaders. He told the soldiers to tie them with ropes, then he gave them to me to punish. I picked up all 6 men in my hand and put 5 of them into my pocket. I lifted the 6th man very close to my face. I pretended that I wanted to eat him and took out my penknife. The colonel and the soldiers looked unhappy when they saw me doing this, and the prisoner was terrified. I put the knife near the man's body and gently cut the ropes around him. Then I placed him on the ground. I did the same thing with the other 5 men. The soldiers and the people were very happy when they saw that I was kind to the men who had tried to hurt me with their arrows. The emperor asked his government ministers what to do with me. They suggested that someone should teach me their language. I studied very hard, and in about a month I could speak it. Then I told the emperor that I was tired of being a prisoner. I asked him to let me go. He said that he would consider my request. He asked me to be patient, and he told me they would treat me well. Then the emperor told me that he wanted his soldiers to search me for weapons. I replied that I would show his men everything I had in my pockets. The emperor thanked me, but he explained that the law was very clear. The search had to be carried out by the emperor's men themselves. He asked me to help the men carry out the search. I agreed to do this. I picked up the 2 men very carefully and put them into my coat pockets. The 2 men later wrote a report for the emperor. In the right coat pocket of the Great Man Mountain, after the strictest search, we found only one great piece of coarse cloth, large enough to be a footcloth for your Majesty's chief room of state. In the left pocket, we saw a huge silver chest with a cover of the same metal, which we the searchers were not able to lift. We desired it should be opened, and one of us stepping into it found himself up to the mid-leg in a sort of dust, which was flying up to our faces, set us both a-sneezing for several times together. In his right waistcoat pocket, we found a prodigious number of white thin substances folded one over another, about the bigness of 3 men, tied with a strong cable and marked with black figures, which we humbly conceive to be writings, every letter almost half as large as the palm of our hands. Finally, the emperor granted me my freedom, and I thanked him sincerely. The people of Lilliput were overjoyed at my release. After being granted my freedom, I left the Empire of Lilliput with a joyful heart. Thanks for watching.